Finding difficult passengers on the Ellis Island Manifest. This talk was presented at the International Association of Jewish Genealogical Societies virtual conference on August 10th to 13th, 2020. This is another JDW Talks. My targeted audience are people interested in Ellis Island, those who can't find their manifests, genealogists, historians, and others. I have a handout on this talk that you can see there. There's a link. And if you want to know more about me, I have a link there to a small website. This was recorded in June of 2020, and then I augmented it with a couple of slides in August of 2020. So Ellis Island is an island in the New York Harbor. It's often been called the Island of Hope and the Island of Tears because it has a central role in immigration into the United States during a specific period of time. It was active between 1892 and 1924. Those are the major years. And it finally closed in 1954. And it's a major tourist attraction today around the harbor. It's been estimated that close to 40% of all current U.S. citizens can trace at least one of their ancestors to Ellis Island. Not sure what that's based on, but you will see that that sentence in many different places. So it's an important part of genealogy research, especially individuals that came through during this period of time. However, there are a number of genealogists who feel sure that their great-grandfather came through Ellis Island, but can't find them. And for those people, it's the Island of Blues. In fact, I'm going to change the background to blue for this talk. Now, there's a bunch of possibilities if you can't find someone. There are low possibilities. They came in under another's papers. The first name used was their last name. They had enough money to come in first and second class, and there is a gap in the record from 1897 through 1903. Most immigrants came in third class. Medium possibilities are the individual was illiterate, and whatever name was put on the manifest, they couldn't tell whether it was right or not, never corrected it. There might be nicknames and abbreviations for names you don't expect. There may be other errors on the manifest that will mislead you, and you won't think it's your particular ancestor. And 30% did come through a different port during this time period, including some that went to Canada and then came across into the United States. So always be in the back of your mind, they may not have come through Ellis Island. And then there are high possibilities of why you can't find people, that they may have been mistranscribed on a name index. The U.S. name that you're used to is not the manifest name, not the old country name. And then there's a problem of degraded manifests. And that's what I want to emphasize, although the whole topic of mistranscribed, etc., and how to find these people is the subject of this talk. I have put my research on a information file on JewishGen, and I'm giving you a handout that will have references, and one of the references is this one. So you can go back and look at this paper, which mimics what I'm going to talk about, but I'll have a lot more visuals here. So what started my research interest in this field? Now, let me quote from my paper, the opening statements. On May 23rd, 1907, the SS Cecilia, and I'll tell you why I am pronouncing it that way, of the Hamburg American line arrived at the port of New York after a long 19-day passage. It carried my great-grandfather, Freim Parmet. Now, this ship is actually pretty famous. It's pretty famous. It's even in a book of 10 ships that rocked the world. Do you know why it's famous? Well, I already told you it brought my great-grandfather. Of course, that's not the answer. The answer is that this ship was sold to a Japanese concern. It was renamed the Komagata Maru, probably mispronouncing that. And this picture was taken in 1914 in Vancouver, outside of Vancouver, British Columbia. And it's a very famous voyage about immigration, Canadian immigration laws. People were turned away, and the people in Vancouver have established a monument for this voyage and apologized for it as well. An important time of immigration in Canada. Now, if one looks at this ship and looks at the manifest pages, one can see that there's a problem here. And the problem is there's a high amount of damage to the manifest, especially on the lower left-hand corner. And that whole left hand is where the names are of the passengers. So during my research on this, there are a couple of questions that arose, and I'm able to answer, I think, all of these. How did the degradation occur? How widespread is the problem? When did the degradation happen? And how do you find passenger names on degraded manifests and other difficult situations, especially when their name has been torn off the sheet? There's a really nice journal in August of 1943 from the Department of Justice that has an essay on how they microfilmed the manifests. They microfilmed the manifests in the 1940s, and then they destroyed them, I think, in 1948. So this explains the procedure, and there's some really good tidbits of information here. They discussed the size of the manifest pages and how they varied. The Cecilia is in volume 2027. When a ship manifest comes in, it's put in a volume with other ship manifests of that day. There are 4 ships in this volume, 400 pages. The average weight of 150 pages was about 20 pounds. So volume 2027 must have weighed at least 50 pounds. And in order to turn pages, it's going to be very, very difficult. So I made up a mock-up of what I think the size of the manifest was of the Cecilia, and you can see, well, that there's an RIP zone there. The manifests were put into the volume so the binder was on the right. So the free end is where the name column is. And in order to turn the pages, you would be turning it from the lower left, which is exactly where the damage you see is mostly on these ship manifests. So here is an actual page, a damaged page. You can kind of see the binding on the right side, those dark areas. I should mention the article pointed out that damaged pages like this couldn't be photographed as is. Instead, they were laminated. And and I think that's the reason why we see that dark area on the right, which was probably a folded part of the manifest. They straightened it out, laminated it, and then took the microfilm photograph. So we've answered one of the questions, which is, how did it happen? I think it's pretty obvious. The 1943 article goes on to say that approximately 5% of the sheets that they found are torn or crumpled or otherwise damaged. So 1 out of 20, that's pretty high, manifest sheets may have problems with the name column. Now, we're going to spend a lot of time on this page throughout the talk. This is a Cecilia, and this happens to be sheet 9. There are numbers within the ship, and there may be stamp numbers in the bottom, which are numbers within the volume. But this is numbers within the ship. We're on sheet 9. And if we go down here to the degraded area, this is line 27. And here we have a 12-year-old. The name is gone, but the rest of the information is there. It's just perfect if you could just get to it. That person is Meyer Schachter. That's his U.S. name. Above it is sheet 9, line 26. He's traveling with David Hoffner, who only has the last 3, basically the 3 letters of his name on the sheet. How do I know that? Well, when I looked at this and I looked at the whole manifest, I wanted to pick an example. And it turns out there's another place on the microfilm that points me to these two on those 2 lines. And I'm going to talk about that as one of my strategies to find people. So I'm going to show you during this talk 2 strategies that put Meyer on this ship and 3 more strategies that place him on that specific sheet and line number. In addition, I'll show you David has an additional 2 strategies to find his specific ship and sheet line number. And that's what the basis of this talk is going to be. I'm going to follow these 2 people. And I'll also show you that some of the strategies, if you're not careful, will give you the wrong ship information. I'll present the strategies in order of when the database or document was first produced. So, these 2 came out of the port of Hamburg, and I am going to talk about the Hamburg Lists. The Hamburg line, the docks themselves weren't in New York. They were in Hoboken, New Jersey. So I have a nice postcard of that in my collection. And I found this quote that it's estimated that approximately 1/3 of immigrants departing Central and Eastern Europe between 1850 and 1830 departed from Hamburg. So you have, if you have Eastern European ancestors, you have a 1/3 chance that they left from the port of Hamburg, Germany. And the passenger list index is available on Ancestry. It's a pay site. The list was generated by the Hamburg State Archives. It was done in Hamburg by Germans who were trained to recognize old script. And I think that the sheets are still available. I don't think they've been destroyed. So if I come into this index and I put down Meyer Schachter, which is his American name, and just put down roughly he was born about 1895, I get one result. Maya Shachter. There he is. No, that's not who he is. This Maya Shachter came in 1911 on a different ship. And that's the only result you would get. If however, you relax your assumptions and say, well, Meyer, more or less, Schachter, broad search, etc. And a lot of indexes give you the opportunity of relaxing it. So it's not that it has to be this. If you do this, I think you'll get three individuals. One of them actually is a female. And now we see our, quote, our Maya Shachter coming in 1907. His name is not quite spelled the way we were looking for. It's a different spelling, an older spelling for his first name, and a German type spelling for his last name. So I'm going to ask Albert here, what sort of lesson have we learned? And Einstein says you need to relax your assumptions and cut down on exact searches, which may give you false positives. Here is on the Hamburg list of the Cecilia, and you can see Meyer, whatever that is. It's been transcribed as Schachter, obviously, and above it is David Hafner. You see they're traveling together on that. The Hamburg list appears to be done independently of the U.S. ship manifest. I'm still trying to figure out the correlation between the two lists. The Hamburg list shows 546 entries. There are 11 crossouts. So those are people who were going to go on this voyage, but didn't make the boat, so they were crossed out. There are no first or second class passengers on this ship. They're all steerage. They're all third class passengers. So I think that 546 entries is probably what actually was on there. And that's what we're going to compare our various strategies against. The second strategy is something called a ship's book index. There are a number of films. It starts in 1906 to 1943 for Ellis Island. And I think that a lot of you have never used this resource. It's available online. I'm going to explain what it was. It contains 7.5 million names. So if 12 million people came through Ellis Island, that's a significant number. The films and the searches are based on the arrival period, the shipping line, and the ship name and specific date. How were they used? Well, the citizenship process starting 1906, usually, person wants to become a citizen. The law says when you apply, you have to say when, how, and where you came into the country. Someone then went into the volumes of manifests, found where you came in, checked it off, and issued a certificate of arrival to the court. Looks like a very tedious process. So these 34,000 books, one for each voyage coming in, starting in 1906, actually lists the name of a person and where they are on the manifest. So the first thing you would do if you were an immigration inspector is go to the books first and then go to the volumes. The books were done after the U.S. manifest was created. And I think it was also done after the ship departed port because there are no canceled out passengers on the book. I have here a quote from the Encyclopedia of Ellis Island that the and I'll add stuff, the U.S. immigration boarding inspectors were given a handwritten copy of the ship's passenger list, besides the manifest, that had been prepared in advance by the steamship's purser and his assistants. And if that's the case, the person had to look this up. That's the case. I had to look it up. That a purser is an officer on a ship who keeps the accounts, especially the head steward on a passenger vessel. Now, this is in part of my collection. In fact, it was an expensive part. Is a list of passengers coming into Ellis Island from Rotterdam in 1892. It's the same shape and the same cover as the index books, which were destroyed along with the manifest, by the way, in the 1940s. But the only thing missing here, it's not an index book, is that there's no page or line number here. So this sort of book may have been in use before 1906, sporadically by some shipping lines. It gives you a feeling for the index book. The index books are on Family Search. They also have a name index there, but first I want to go through a direct way of getting to the film. So here we start on Family Search. It's a free website. You do have to register. And we look for the shipping line, Hamburg American. We look at 1907. We look at late May that the Cecilia came in, and we arrive at roll 40. This is online, so we click on the symbol for the film. We see it's Hamburg America line. We see the start of various index books. Sometimes the cover is not there and makes it difficult to figure out where we are. But this is by arrival date. We go through the books. We're at 338, frame of 1052. It is the Cecilia in volume 2027. And now there are two ways of searching this book. Let's assume, for instance, that you're on a ship manifest and you can't quite make out what the name of that person is. Or you found a line that you think that it's your person, but the name is, illegible, degraded, whatever. You can go to that ship. You have the page and line number and look for that, go up and down the columns. Or you can look for the passenger name. We're going to look for Maya Schachter. And we find, and remember, this is the U.S. ship manifest this is based on, not the Hamburg list. We find out that assume it's not a typo, that a transcription from German to English added an L to the name. So now we have Maya Schachter. We know it's him because the index says 927 of this ship. There's only one person on that line. And there's the Hamburg listing. Let's take a look at the index, the book index, name index on Family Search. Now you got to be careful here, but you can do things. So here I've entered Meyer. Perhaps I shouldn't have done an exact search, but that's the check of that box. And the last name, I'm using wildcard searches. You should know something about wildcard searches. By putting an asterisk after the SCH, it picks up anybody whose last name starts with those three letters. And if I do that, one of the people I see is a Maya Schachter, came in 1907 to New York. And I think, hey, that's pretty good. That worked out pretty well. Now, if I click on Maya Schlachter. There's a summary there, or I can go to the film. Let's look at the summary. So the summary, you can see that kind of text page icon or the camera. Let's go to the summary. So the summary tells me that Maya Schlachter came in 1907 to New York on the ship Hamburg. Hamburg? In fact, I've seen this index give you the wrong year and the wrong ship. But the original document link on the right will get you to the right page. So you have to be very careful. You have to go into the ship book itself, go to the front of it, where the cover is, and make sure that you have the right ship and date. Otherwise, you won't. So Albert says, never trust search summaries. Always look at the records. The Hamburg list has 546 people. The index book has 541 people. It's missing the A page. Although I've seen books where lots of people are missing. So, you have to be careful. My third search strategy is perhaps census leads. This isn't going to get you to the ship, but it's going to give you information about when that person on the census says that they arrived in the U.S. And warning is, don't trust endings in 0 or 5 because people tend to round off dates. And if you're going to get this information, use the nearest census year to the event. So if they came in 1905, you'd use 1910. But you should look at 20 and 30 as well. The census also tells you when this person was naturalized, because you might want to see if you can find the naturalization papers. So for Meyer, one of these people on Ancestry has a number of censuses, and you can see he was naturalized. At least he said he was naturalized in 1930. He was an alien in 1915. So at least it limits the year range that we should be looking for. So let's look at naturalization papers. That's our fourth strategy. Remember that after 1906, starting in 1906, when, how, and where is supposed to be recorded on the application. However, if the date of your arrival was before June 30th, 1906, it may not be shown accurately on the application, and there may be no certificate of arrival. And in those cases, the naturalization instructions were that to provide documents that you have been in the United States before that date. Okay, so let me be clear, because a lot of people go to these naturalization papers. It clearly says, hey, I'm on this ship on this date, 1903, blah, blah, blah. And nobody checks it. Nobody issues a certificate of arrival. Could have put down the Titanic and perhaps get away with that. You may see on those early transcripts notations that a certificate of arrival was issued, but I think that's not in the majority of cases. So you need to know, according to Einstein, the background of your documents and the limits of their reliability. Luckily, Meyer came after 1906. It was easy to find his naturalization papers online with various indexes. It gives lots of information here. It gives where he was born. He gives his address. It gives how he arrived in New York. And he says, I'm looking at the bottom, he says that, and the whole thing, he says, I arrived on the Cecilia, cute, Cecilia, on or about the 5th day of May, 1907. Now, naturalization is a two-part process. This is his declaration. When he did the second part, and there's the, by the way, there's the certificate of arrival, which does not show you, it shows you the name on the manifest. It doesn't show you where that name is on the manifest. So it's obvious that when the certificate of arrival was issued, that the manifest was not degraded, and it was issued in 1929. The petition came next. There's a certain year gap, two-year requirement for declaration, another 3 years for petition. And this time he knows that he came on the Cecilia, and he also gets the date of arrival correct now, of 23rd of May. So let's turn our attention to Strategy 5, which are the WPA card films that you can find on Family Search. But first I'm going to give you a warning that the Family Search is not so easy sometimes. The pages may not load easily for your browser. The roles may be mislinked. The Family Search versions and their versions of the image sequences may not be intuitive or understandable. So you can read about these problems on my information file. I have a link on my handout to understand the situations, or I've actually shown it with examples on my YouTube video, Manifest Destiny, which goes into detail about these problems. And that's what it looks like. That was done actually after this was recorded in June of 2020. The Works Progress Administration in 1938 to early 1940s transcribed index cards from the actual manifest. So the ship manifest compiled at port of embarkment, that's the manifest itself. The WPA transcribes these cards during the 1938 to 43 period of time. The manifests are filmed in 1943 to 1944, and the manifests and the index books are destroyed in 1948. And according to Gary Malkatoff, well-known genealogist in 2001, that every evidence is that the accuracy of surnames on the film, the microfilm, index is considerably superior to the accuracy of surnames on the recently released, I'll add, Ellis Island Database, which we'll talk about later. And there may be some reasons for that. They're transcribed directly from the manifest, avoiding problems with legibility. They're New York-based transcribers, more familiar with European names and handwriting. And they're on 2 sequences of National Archive and Records Administration films that Family Search has filmed and has put online. T519 is a series of films from 1897 to 1902. Those 115 rolls, the versions of them are online at Family Search, and you use the last name of the immigrant. The cards are in last name of the immigrant. T621 starts where the other one left off, from 1902 to 1943. There are 744 rolls of film, and in this case, the index cards are ordered by Soundex of the person, and then first name. Although the cards are, roughly in order. Now, I was concerned about T621. I actually have a full set of films that I got that was given to me, and that's a long story. But you can see that they lagged in terms of the number of roles that were actually online that you could use. But yesterday, or a couple of days ago, it jumped. So now there are 516 roles that are online. You can search these. Kind of neat. So, of course, the question is this. In terms of the Cecilia, the manifest created in 1907. What was in the manifest was transcribed in, actually, I think I have a specific date of that. I think it was toward the end of that period. Might have this on the slide. And in 1944, the manifests were filmed. That's what I was thinking about. So I'm not sure when they were actually transcribed on index cards. I know the film was done on July of 1944 because it's shown on the microfilm. When did the degradation occur? There, before indexing, or after indexing? So let's find the roll of film that Meyer should be on. We're going to have to figure out his Soundex code. So I enter it. Steve Morse has a utility for that. I enter Schlachter with the L, and I get an S423 code. And then I go on to the list of films that are at Family Search on T621. I've given you that in the handout. The names that are there, like Frank and Annalise, are not the last names, they're the first names. Because if you have a Soundex code, all the names are the same as far as the Soundex code. And we find out that we should be looking at roll 633. Now, if we had done Schachter, you can see that the Soundex code is quite different. That's the problem. If you have a consonant, some of the consonants like WHY doesn't make any difference. It'll change dramatically the Soundex code. So does Maya Schlachter have a WPA card? Doesn't seem likely. No, he has one. That was a surprise. The age is off. You can see 927, 1907, Cecilia. He has a card. Card tells you where to find him on that manifest. Let's look at another example for the Cecilia, and I've done this for other ships as well. Rudolph Pollock, he's on 17, I think it's 28. This is a detention page. This is a detention page. We'll talk about that later. And that's what I used initially to find Maya as an example. Where is, now you can look on the upper left at 17. He's there. Oh, his line is pretty much gone, except for maybe a little fragment that might be the difference between solving a family problem, a family puzzle or not. Does he have a card? Absolutely. That was a real surprise. So apparently most of this ship damage occurred in the early 1940s after the WPA indexing. And what happened was there was a war breaking out in Europe, 1939, and aliens were really worried about that they would be deported. So there was a heavy rush of people applying for citizenship. You can see 90,000 applied within 2 weeks. And they had to hire additional clerks. There was a tremendous pressure on these brittle documents. So you need to explore all your options, including the old ways. Now, the Ellis Island Database from the Ellis Island Foundation is very interesting. It was released to the public in 2001, made a big deal about that. It was the first online database. It was searchable. It was neat. And people couldn't get in very, very easily. Uh, it was done by 12,000 Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints volunteers during a 7-year period from photocopies of the film manifests. They obviously didn't have the originals. They were destroyed 40 years earlier. And some of those manifests, those films, I've seen this warning that some exposures on this film are poor quality and may be unreadable. This is the best possible copy. So the incredible job they did, though it's certainly not perfect. It's on the Ellis Island website, but I'll use my colleague SteveMorse.org's website that most people use and will use his gold form. He has a number of ways of searching the Ellis Island database. Maybe too many, because what you want to do is you don't want to have too many entries. If one of them is wrong or unexpected, it throws off everything else. So let's just be careful and just enter Meyer. Sounds like Meyer. Starts with SCH. It's like a wildcard search. And using starts with, it would pick up both Schachter and Schlachter. Let's also add the year of arrival is 1907. The age is between 10 and 12, 10, 11, or 12. That's it. We get a number of people, and his name is not there. Okay. Can we find Maya's name with a no-name search? Because Steve says you can. There's no required field. So we put more in. The ship is the Cecilia. It arrived in 1907. The age is 11 to 12. It arrived at blah, 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 blah. He's a male. In other words, that should pick him up. It does not. The Ellis Island Database did not transcribe nameless lines. In fact, the rumor is that Albert Einstein tried to find Maya Schachter's record by putting in various variations, and that led to his famous quote, "Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results." How many names lines of the 12 million passengers might be impacted by this problem? And I estimate about 75,000. Now, in my research on this, and it's possible on the Morse website to order the names you get in the order of the manifest. You see what happens is that once you start getting to the degraded area, the transcriber put 3 dots for missing information or information they could not figure out. So David's record is 3 dots NER. I think that they should have done 3 dots H, 3 dots L for the lines above them. Once you get to Maya, it doesn't appear on this list at all. Remember that. So Hofner David is 3 dots NER. They also used 3 dots for things they couldn't figure out. Now, when I looked at this, it's Lena Weintraub. But the index shows it as W 3 dots IN 3 dots RAUB. By the way, this didn't give the WPA people any problems at all. How many names on the manifest contain 3 dots? Steve Morse helped me with this, and we came up with over 400,000 passengers have 3 dots in their transcribed name. That's pretty high. Maybe one of the reasons you can't find people. That's about 3.5% of the approximately 12 million immigrants. And how many of those passengers are due to degraded pages? I estimate about 84,000. Can we find David's name with a no-name search? The answer is yes, we can. Enter basically the same information except his age. And we find a number of people on that ship, and there's three dots NER. So the assumptions you aren't aware of will sooner or later trip you up. Let's go on to Ancestry. It's a subscription service. We enter, like we did earlier, Meyer, Schlachter, and guess what? They find his record. In fact, a no-name search also finds his record. What's going on? Well, first of all, they transcribe no-name lines. Although I doubt you'll ever do a search on a no-name line. And I'm also going to show you this, that Ancestry does allow wildcard searches. So here I ask for Meyer, SCH asterisk, and you can see that also brings him up. So what's going on? When immigrants went through Ellis Island, 80% of them had no problems. 12% of them were held temporarily. Maybe they needed money to proceed. Someone had to pick them up. 6% were held for special inquiry. So approximately 1 out of 6 immigrants were held. And there are lists of detentions and special inquiries starting from the early 1900s that are bundled with the manifests on the microfilms. So here's an example. This is my grandmother on the third line, Bila Palmet. There's lots of numbers on the top, as you can see. This is actually sheet 1. She's on line 3. The X denotes that she was detained. When you see the X, and it's the right year, it has to be from early 1900s on, you can go to a specific page at the end. It's typed. Record of detained aliens. There she is. And 1-3 is shown. So this directs you to a particular page. She's picked up by my great-grandfather, Ephraim Palmet, who came on the Cecilia. And here is my great-grandfather. He's down toward the bottom. Ephraim Palmet. Above him is his brother-in-law. There's an SI next to his name. He was held for special inquiry. He's on 1210. And here's a record of aliens held for special inquiry. Another sheet in the manifest microfilm. He's here, Palmet. I think you can see 1210 next to his name. I'll blow it up, 1210. He was held because they thought he was a contract laborer, which was illegal. He wasn't. He was accepted. And then down here on the same page is David and Meyer. They were held because there was they thought they could be likely public charge. And they also were admitted. And there's the 926 and 927. That's how I found them initially. Found somebody on these pages that had a degraded manifest. Okay, so they transcribed those. Neat. The Ellis Island did not, the database. And the detention pages show the page and line number. That's important for you to understand. There's some people who only get the detention page thinking that's all there is. And I tell them, hey, if you have the detention pages, you can go back and actually see the real manifest. You've got the page and line number. Go ahead and do that. Because of this, the no name, we can find 12 of the 68 no names on the Cecilia and 20 of the 79 three dots that were difficult to interpret. So we get a little bit more information. So different websites may give different search results on the same set of documents. So when you look at the count of the indexes, the reason why Ancestry now has 716 entries is because there's lots of duplicate entries, both on the manifest and on the detention pages. Let's look at this one. This is a very good one. Other manifest names, something that a lot of researchers don't know they can do. It turns out there are other names besides the name of the passenger, and that is whether going to join a relative or friend, and what relative or friend, and their name and complete address. Also, starting in 1907, the name and complete address of the nearest relative or friend in the country where the alien came. And the name column is going to show relationship, name going to, address of person, above and below the line. It's difficult to read. So here we have that BIL brother-in-law, that's David, and my father, they're both going to the same person, Solomon Schachter. So in order to use this, I go to Family Search. If I enter their name in here, Solomon Schachter, and look over here, I don't want that. I'm not looking for Solomon Schachter. I'm looking for people who are going to Solomon Schachter. So let's do that again. So now what I do is I can search with a relationship, spouse, parents, other. There's an other category. And I put down Solomon Schachter there. And when I do that, and limit it to passenger arrivals, I have 60 people going to a Solomon Schachter. There are no name results because I think they're using the same Ellis Island database. But there are some 3-dot results, including 3 dots, 3 dots NER. Look at that. Isn't that great? Who is that? How do you know that that's David Hoffner? I didn't tell you that for this record. This person came on May 11th, 1907. That's not when the Cecilia came in. In fact, it looks like it's the same birth date, the same residence, etc. This is not David Hoffman. Credible. That it's another person, and you can see he's 38 years old. The manifest is degraded the same way. It's crossed out. He missed the boat. I have a suspicion this really is David Hoffner. Now, because the line is crossed out, now's the time to go back to the Hamburg list and find out who that person is, because remember, we have that resource. So here I am at the ship, Hamburg list, not the manifest, the ship. And there's a column for people who missed the boat there. They're actually in 2 places. They're crossed out in the regular part of the list, and then over here is the list. And I go down looking for someone with an NER last name, and I find Jacob Hoffner. Someone familiar with the records told me that they're actually the same city, the same town. Here's David's record. So it picks up 2, 3 dots, 3 dots NER. Perhaps David was going to sail, and then they wanted him to take his nephew and then canceled. It's not quite clear what happened there. You could find someone else who did the work. Don't quite advise that. Here's one person who is on Ancestry he came in 1905. His residence is 1910. He came in 1912. Well, something has to be wrong there. And in fact, it's the wrong place he came from. Well, he was born in. MyHeritage has a couple of family trees there. They show the 1905 date from the census, the 1907 on the Cecilia, the 1912. They have the right place, but the arrival date is wrong. That's the date that the arrival date is wrong. So don't trust online trees. Their facts and documents might be fool's gold. Another search for Jewish immigrants is something called HIAS. HIAS does a record search dating from 1909. They helped immigrants come into the United States. There are fees involved here. I wrote to them, and it does not apply in this situation for Meyer because they said that their archives does not go back further than 1909 for records of special inquiry cases and from 1911 for records of arrival. We have no records for 1907. If they came through Boston, I have a reference to a Boston Immigrant Aid Society records, and you might get lucky there. Philadelphia was a port, entry port. Boston, remember 30% of the people came through other ports than Ellis Island during this time period. So again, know the years covered by the search tool. You could do the Wall of Honor, maybe. The Wall of Honor is at Ellis Island. People have paid to put their names up, their relatives' names up on that wall. It doesn't necessarily mean they came through Ellis Island. It's an immigration wall of honor. And I put up a number of mine and my wife's ancestors there. Got a nice certificate. In fact, if you find your ancestor's name there, you can get a certificate like this one. There's a search for who put up the name, and that search would reveal that I put up it for my grandparents' country of origin, but it doesn't give an indication they actually came through Ellis Island, and you'd have to track me down. There's no entry for Maya. So here we are, waiting to get into Ellis Island. And today, there are crowds like this. It's an incredible tourist attraction. I wonder what the immigrants who went through it on the island of Tears think about that. But what I want to do is I want to start to leave you with some take-home messages. First, there are multiple tools exist for finding your elusive Ellis Island relatives. Learn to use name search utilities to the fullest and recognize their limitations. And when you use one of these things, actually experiment with it to see what their capabilities are. And appreciate, as I do, what your ancestors went through to come to America. You're looking at my mother as the baby, first one born in the United States. To her right is my great-grandfather, Freim Pommet, my grandmother above the baby. And leave you with two more ideas. My working premises on these things is Albert Einstein. It's not that I'm so smart, it's just that I stay with problems longer. And I found a number of records of very difficult people by following Sherlock Holmes. How often have I said that when you have excluded the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. So as we say goodbye to Albert, who says in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. And with all those quotes, you have heard one of my JDW talks, augmented in August of 2020. Those talks on my channel, there are 5 Ellis Island talks, including how to find difficult people and the name change myth. There are talks on birding, birding optics, and the life of naturalist Adolphus L. Heermann, where a number of species were named in his honor, and an additional 6, and I will increase that actually, but there are now 6 U.S. and New York City census talks for genealogists and other researchers there, including information on the 1950 census, which will become public in April of 2022. So I hope you've enjoyed these talks, and you can always subscribe to this channel. So thank you. Bye-bye.